Good morning and welcome to the Rock. It's so nice to be up here, and after such great praise and worship. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Penny. Thank Gareth for doing the technical side of it as well, and thank you, folk, for singing out very well. I just want to, I entitled the message this morning, and I wrote that after I actually got it together, but I had entitled it, Hagar the Horrible. Now, for those of you who know who Hagar the Horrible, does everybody know who Hagar the Horrible is? Okay, Hagar the Horrible is a cartoon strip. Okay, and Hagar is he's like a Viking, and his wife is called Helga. Very good. I'm very impressed with that, Josh. And does anybody know what the dog is called? Snert. Okay. That was the dog. Anyway, this particular, I remember reading one of the actual strips that sticks in my mind is you have a beggar sitting at the traffic light. And he's got no money, he's got nothing, he's got no shoes on, he's got nowhere to go. He's just sitting there begging. And Hagar and his wife come across, and Hagar pulls out from his pocket a bottle of beer and gives it to him. After they walk away a little bit, his wife said, "Don't you think that was a bit rough doing that?" He says, "No, I've just saved him a trip to the bottle store." This sermon has absolutely got nothing to do with bottle stores or Hagar the Horrible, the cartoon strip. But what it does have is Hagar, who was the slave girl of Abraham's wife, it's got a lot to do with her. And I think when we actually get into it and we start reading it, it has a lot to do with us as well, because we've all got a little bit of Hagar in our lives. You see, many, many years before Hagar came into the life of Abraham, God had called him. Abraham was in the land of Ur. The land of Ur was in the Chaldees, which some of you still don't know where that is. It's in modern-day Iraq, or then it was called Mesopotamia. And God called him, and he said, "I want you to leave your family. I want you to leave your parents. I want you to leave everything behind." Now, his father was an idol maker, and Abraham was a pagan. And they used to make all these little engravings of dolls and stuff like that and sell them. That was their business. And God said, and God chose him from this life. God chose him from this life as being an idol maker and said, "Listen, I want you to come and leave your father and do all of this." Now, we know that Abraham is the father of all the religions, of the father of Islam. He's the father of Judaism, and he's the father of Christianity. And he was told to go and leave his father and go, and God said, "I will take you to a place that I will show you, and then you will know where it is." So Abraham was very faithful, but he didn't do what God said. What he did was he left the land of Ur, which was almost like a port, great place for trading. He left there and he went to a place called Haran. Haran is in Turkey. It's about 700 miles from Ur. And guess what? He took his family with him. He took his nephew Lot. He took his father Terah with him. So he half did what God told him to do. And do you know what happened? God didn't use him until he actually obeyed to what God was going to say. God was going to use him in a big way. So they go to this land, and the land is called Canaan, and today we call that land Israel. And as he got to the land of Canaan, after traveling all those hundreds of miles and all those sheep, and he had a lot of sheep and cattle, and he had a lot of livestock, and he was quite a wealthy man. And when he got to these places, and he got to the land of Canaan, there was a famine. So there was nowhere to feed his animals. So he had to then go. Now, can you imagine God sending you somewhere, and then when you get there, it's like, mistake. Have you ever done that? Have you ever been in a situation where you think, God's told me to do this, and as soon as you do it, you think, I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, he got to Canaan, and then he had to go to Egypt, because that's where the land, where the lush grass for the feeding of the cattle and the feeding of the goats, and feeding of the sheep, all of that had to take place. And that's where he took himself and his wife. And God promised him. God said to Abraham, he said, I will bless you. I will make you a great nation. He said, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. But the only problem was, being a great nation meant you had to have an offspring, and he didn't have any children. When Abraham left the land of Ur, he was 75 years old. By the time he gets into Canaan, he's over 80 years old. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it's not, to me, it's not family time, 80 years old. As he was going on, and God was telling him, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make you a great nation. And they must have heard this and heard it. And eventually what happened was, they thought, well, why don't we give God a little bit of a handout here? Because that's what we try to do as well. We try to help God. We think, oh, my God, I want to do something, and maybe if I do it, it'll just make it that little bit less of a miracle so that God doesn't have to strain so much at doing it. And that's what he did. So what happened was, we're going to look at Genesis. We're going to find out about grace, but we're going to look at grace from the Old Testament. And I'm going to turn to Genesis chapter 16. If you've got this with you, great. If you haven't, you can read it at home. Genesis chapter 16. And the Bible starts off in verse 1. Now, Sarah, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Now we get Hagar. That's the Egyptian slave's name. Oh, incidentally, Sarah didn't tell us that was her name. That's what the narrator of this script is telling us. Her name was Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I build a family through her. Now, that in those days, that was pretty acceptable. The slave was, you owned the slave. You owned it. And you didn't say to the slave, look, I've got a little bit of a proposition for you to do. Would you mind sleeping with my husband? That didn't work out. You were told. So there was a lot of abuse going on. Yeah, and that's the way it was. It was natural. It was abuse. You were told what to do. So the Lord's kept me from having a family, and, Abraham agreed. Now, Sarah was a beautiful woman, by the way, because when he went into Egypt, he had to tell lies about her. He had to say it was his sister so that the pharaohs would keep away from her. But Abraham, he agreed to what Sarah had said. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, now he's living here 10 years. So he's now around about the age of, 86. He's about 86 years old. And he gave to her husband to be his wife. This is Hagar. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. That is a miracle in itself. When she knew she was pregnant, now this is Sarah, now this is a story we all know, but I bet there's some parts of the story you don't know. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise Sarah. Haven't we always been taught that Sarah puts her out? Isn't Sarah the one that puts out Hagar and Ishmael? But here we see in chapter 16 that she is putting her out because the maid is despising her. Now, why is she despising her? She's just thinking, you know what, I've got no respect from you, no respect for you, because you are actually asking me to sleep with your husband. Then Sarah said to Abraham, you are responsible for the wrong I'm suffering. And isn't that so true, guys? Isn't that so true? It's your fault, but it was your idea. Doesn't matter whose idea it was. Your fault. You went through with it. So she was despised. You're responsible for the wrong I'm suffering. I put my slave in your arms. She even admits it. I put my slave in your arms. It's your fault. And now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. Well, may the Lord judge between you and me. And this is a cracker. You know, I often get, and I do realize this is being video recorded, and I do realize your mother's going to watch this. But I always get scriptures. I have handed you over to the Lord. I've given them over to you. Now, that's true. My wife does that often. She says to me, well, you do what you want, but I'm handing you over to the Lord. And as soon as she hands me over to the Lord, then she gets stuck into me. I'm now suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Your slave becomes his slave. Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she mistreated her by telling her to go and sleep with this guy. And now she's starting to mistreat her around the house. Clean this, do that. That's not clean enough. This isn't clean enough. You haven't hung the curtains up properly. You have hung them up upside down. But madam, we always hang them up like that. No, but that's not the way I want them this week. Mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The maid fled from Sarah. Now we know that Sarah puts her out. That's what the Bible says. But chapter 16 says that she fled, she ran away. And where did she run to? She ran from Hagar, and the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in a desert. She ran into a wilderness. She just ran into the wilderness. It was a spring that was beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar. Who said Hagar? The angel of the Lord. He called her by name. But Sarah didn't call her by name. Abraham didn't call her by name. But the voice coming through the angel, God called her by name. Where have you come from and where are you going? He's asking her, where have you come from? Where are you going? You're in the middle of the wilderness here. I'm running away from my mistress, Sarah. She answered. When the angel of the Lord told her to go back again to your mistress and submit to her, and the angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. Right, so here we have we've got this maid now, and she's gone away, and she's upset. She's conceived, and she despises her mistress. She doesn't like the idea of having to have a child. Now she's got to bring the child up. And here we find that the angel of the Lord has said to do something that, you and I wouldn't want to do, because when you run away from someone or something, you do not really want to go back to that same place again. But sometimes you have to. Sometimes you've got to go back there. Go back there, he says. We will go back and see her. Her character was one where she didn't want to go back. But the angel said, go back. I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you're now pregnant. So obviously she didn't know. She didn't know. She just despised her mistress because she was told to do what she was doing. And she wasn't comfortable with that. This woman was from a different culture. She wasn't from the land of Ur. She wasn't from the Chaldees. She wasn't from Iraq. She didn't come through from Turkey. This lady was an Egyptian. and she was an Egyptian slave. Now the angel of the Lord, the messenger of God, says, you are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son, and you shall call him Ishmael. Now, we've all heard of Ishmael. And this is where she gets a bit of a bad rap, because over the years, we have known Hagar to be the mother of the Arab race, which in turn seems to pretty much be Islam. We know that she is, there's always going to be fighting going on. And in fact, the Apostle Paul doesn't leave her alone very much in the New Testament. When we read Galatians chapter 4, he compares Hagar and Sarah. And he compares Hagar to being Mount Sinai. This is the law. And he says, Sarah, this is grace, Mount Zion, where Jesus was crucified. This is the law, and this is grace. Now, that's okay, but the law was a slave. You were in bondage to law, and that's why he was using this as a metaphor. He was using it not to degrade her, but he was using it to explain to the people she was a slave, and just the same way the Jewish people were slaves to the law, but Sarah, she represents the grace, the freedom that comes with God. So here we go. And now we read a little bit more. After Abraham returned, during the night, I'm going to read down a little bit. During the night, at verse 16, he recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot. And that's the wrong chapter. Okay. That was going back a little bit. That was back a chapter or two. Then the angel of the Lord told her to go back to her mistress, submit to her. And the angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that you can't count. And the angel of the Lord said to her, you are now pregnant. You will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael. That's what you're going to call him. For the Lord has heard of your misery. Ishmael in Hebrew means the Lord hears. The Lord has heard you. Where did he hear her? In the wilderness. The Lord heard her in the wilderness. Then he goes on to describe him a bit, and you can take what you want out of this. He'll be a wild donkey of a man. His hands will be against everyone, and everyone's hands will be against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. I think he was Irish. So he gave it. So she gave this name to the Lord, who spoke to her. Now she's giving the Lord a name. If you are the God who sees me, so she's given him the name of the God who sees me. Ishmael means the God who hears me. Now she's given him the name, the God who sees me, for she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. Isn't it lovely to know that? You know, I want to take this away from this corporate little event. I want to take it away from, yeah, well, we know God sees us all. But I want you to put your name on it. The Lord sees me, Lionel. The Lord sees me, Fred. The Lord sees me, Hester. The Lord sees you individually. Individually, he sees you. She ran into the wilderness. She didn't run in with a lot of people. She ran in on her own, and God saw her. So she gave the name of the Lord sees me. That is why the well was called Bir Laha Roy. Okay, so what we do now is if we look at this and we see this situation, this plight, she's a slave girl, she's got no rights at all. And she despises her. She despises Sarah because of what she's made to do. And then she turns around and God speaks to her. Hagar ran away. She was abused. She finds herself in a place that isn't her place. She finds herself in a place that it's a wilderness in Canaan. This isn't my place. Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt you're in a place that you really shouldn't be in? Adam and Eve, they were put out of their place. Cain and Abel, Cain was put out, the Bible says he was put out east of Eden. He was in the land of Nod. He was way out of his place. And now she's out of her place. And Jesus, when he crossed the Jordan River, he went into the wilderness. He was out of place. But you know what you do when you're out of your place? Do you know what you do? You learn something. But do you know why? Because you're going to be out of your place again sometime. And when you go out of your place again sometime, you are going to learn from the first time that you've been out of it. The first time you've gone into that darkness, the first time you've gone into that hellhole, the first time that you've been there, the first time that you've been down, when you're down and you're in the gutter or wherever you are, you learn from something. And it can be anything. You can learn from a divorce, you can learn from health problems, you can learn from financial problems, but you learn. You do learn from this. You can actually learn from poverty. Now, here's what's happened is she's now in this lonely place, and she doesn't want to stay here. And we get this, sometimes we get into the wilderness of doubt. Sometimes we get into the wilderness of unbelief. Sometimes we, and I'm saying this because I believe we all go through this. I believe we go through a period in our lives, and some of us are going through it now, some of us will go through it, where you go through a period of doubt, and I doubt that. Or, no, I don't believe that. Now, doubt and unbelief are different. You can doubt, but unbelief, you can't. Once you believe, you are a believer. But you can doubt, you're a believer. But it doesn't make you any less of a believer. She was in this dark place. You can be in a space that's in between careers, or you can be at a place where you don't know whether you're going to move or whether you're not going to move or whatever you're going to do. But you're going to be in this place, and it's going to be a wilderness for you. Wilderness is not about getting out, but wilderness really is about learning while you're in there. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to understand that when I'm in this place, I told you Jesus went into the wilderness. Remember, the devil tempted him? He went into that wilderness and he came out again. And where did he use it again? He used it in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says, I've been hounded by this guy, Satan, the evil one, before, and I handed him off. I defended by Scripture. It goes into the Garden of Gethsemane, and the same thing happens again. So here we see Jesus is using it all over again. God hears. God sees. God hears what you do. God sees where you are. He knows exactly where you are. Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. Why? You are with me. You are my provider. So nobody called her name except God. He knows your name. He says, return to where you've come from. And she heard. You see, when we talk about God and we talk about people, and often people say, well, tell us about your religion. Tell us about your Christianity and tell me what it's about. And we always start at the cross, and it's not a bad place to start. But you see, it starts long before that, because God is actually love. And this is the thing. He loves us so much. He hears us. He loves us. He sees us. Now, she sees this. She's just had a revelation. She's had an epiphany. She's in this wilderness. All of a sudden, she's got this revelation. He knows. God knows her name. God hears what she's saying. And sometimes we talk a lot and we grumble a lot. We do. We complain. God hears you. Think, he's not going to listen to me. He will hear you. And God sees you. But he doesn't just see you. He sees your name. He sees your name. He sees your circumstances. He sees where you are. Let's have a look at chapter 21. I'm going to be coming to a close. Chapter 21. She's back in there again. The child is now 14 years old. She goes back. She has the child. They treat the child very well because they think it's a child of the promise. But God knows it isn't. And then when God says that that Sarah's going to have a baby, and Sarah at this age is 99 years old, and Abraham is 100 years old, Sarah laughs, and she calls him Isaiah, because not Isaiah, Isaac, that's what it's called in Hebrew, laughter. That's what it means. But in chapter 21, we see she's back in there again, and we look at verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned. And on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. Now you've got to understand this. The child is weaned. We're talking about Isaac. And Isaac has been weaned. He's now growing up into be a boy. But on the other hand, Ishmael, he is now 14 years old. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar, the Egyptian, had born to Abraham was mocking. The Bible says was laughing. We would get the example. We would assume teasing. When you actually get into the word, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. It could mean smiling. It doesn't mean to say he was being mocked. We tend to, whoever was writing it, when they write it down, they want us to be on the side of Isaac, not on the side of Ishmael. And she said to Abraham, this is Sarah, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never, never share in the inheritance in my son Isaac. There's a great sermon in there somewhere. I'm not going to do it now. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because he was concerned for his son, because Ishmael was his son. But God said to him, do not be distressed about the boy from your slave woman. Listen, whatever Sarah tells you, do it, because it's through Isaac, the son of the promise, the way I had originally intended, God says, because it's through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation, and because he is your offspring. Early the next morning, Abraham, what does he do? He took some food and a skin of water, and he gave them to Hagar, and he said, off you go. I'm letting you go now. You go. This skin of water will last you at least an hour. You just go into this wilderness, you'll be fine. He set them on his shoulders, and he set her off with the boy. She went on her way, and she wandered in the desert of Bathsheba. And when the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away. I was about 100 yards away, about 100 meters away. She would put him away. She would fire, and she would say, I'm putting him there. And the reason she put him there was because she didn't want to see her son die. I don't want to see my son die. So I'm going to sit under this tree. He's going to sit under that one. We've got no water left. We've got no food left. We've got nothing left. We've just been sent away from the father of all the religions. We've just been sent away from the man who had bought me. We've just been sent away from a guy who's taken us out of Egypt and paid for me. And now he's given us this. And we are just going to go here and die. And guess what happened? We go to the next verse, 17. God heard the boy crying. God hears us. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and asked her, what is the matter, Hagar? He mentions her name again. What is the matter, Hagar? It's not that he doesn't know. He wants her to ask. God often wants us to ask. And sometimes, oh, well, God knows what I need. I'm not going to ask him for it. He wants you to ask him. Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Then he says, lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and what did she see then? She saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave it to the boy to drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. God never left him. He lived in the desert and became an archer. And while he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt, from his own culture. So we see in chapter 21, she's in the desert, she was pregnant. Now she's got the child, the pregnancy's come forth, and the child is now forth. She's now with a son, and God questions her again. He says, what's wrong with you this time again? And she's, by this time, lost faith. Lord, last time I was in this desert, you promised me this, and now I've lost faith. We go there. We have often lost faith. But in verse 17, the Bible says that God sees her, he sees the boy, and then once God sees her and he sees the boy, what does she see? She sees the provision that God has made. And we have heard that this morning about sometimes you think you're in the wilderness, but God is our provider. He is the one that will provide for us. So you don't have to get out of your wilderness for God to see you. He sees you in the middle of it, and he will provide for you. You don't have to beg and scrape and strafe. Whatever you're going through, whatever your darkest time is, whatever your hopes, your dreams are, whatever it is, just ask God for it, because he sees you. He sees you and he hears you. And when he sees you and he hears you, he will provide for you. God bless you.